Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, I'm going to be going over all of my rereads that I did in the year 2022, excluding Stephen King. You guys will be seeing that on Friday, where I talk about all of the Stephen King books that I reread in 2022. For this video, it's going to be all of the other non-Stephen King books that I reread in 2022, which is still a goddamn lot, and that's the main reason why my main goal for 2023 is to reread severely less, because I did so much rereading in 2022. I want to actually get to new to me books because I have a lot of them. So I'm going to be discussing all of the rereads that I had in 2022. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's go ahead and start with my favorite author, George R.R. Martin, Georgie boy. I am, of course, still rereading A Song of Ice and Fire. I think I reread the first book in 2021, and then at the beginning of the year, I reread Clash of Kings, and then I finished Storm of Swords, and then I'm not quite done with Feast for Crows, but the plan is to finish that in December, and then in January, I'll read book 5. If I have enough time, I'd love to get to it this month in December, but I doubt it. And I also reread a couple of his shorter things, like The Ice Dragon, which is one of his short stories that he wrote in the 80s, and it got turned into a pretty cool illustrated edition. Also, another one of his short stories is Meat House Man, which is one of the darker tales I've ever read, and it got turned into a very interesting comic book. That's not the only fantasy series I've been rereading. If you're familiar with our Discord, you know that I've been doing a Shattered Sands read-along. So, of course, I've reread 12 Kings of Sherikai in November. And then also I reread the prequel novella of Sand and Malice Made. I will be rereading With Blood Upon the Sand in December. And then next year, I'll reread books 3 and 4, and then finally catch up with the series and actually read books 4 and 6 for the first time. But yeah, I'm also rereading those and some more fantasy rereads. Oh boy, so many rereads. Brandon Sanderson, Era 2, Mistborn Era 2. I reread The Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self, and Bands of Mourning, all leading up to me reading The Lost Metal, which is the last book in the Mistborn Era 2 quartet. And The Lost Metal is probably my favorite, even though Alloy of Law, Shadows of Self are very good. Bands of Mourning is pretty good. Overall, I do love Era 2, and I do think it's better than the first era. And some more fantasy stuff. I reread Dead House Gates and then read Memories of Ice for the first time. And so I'm going to try to get to more Malazan in 2023. That just fell. Also, I think I reread Lies of Locke Lamora in 2021. And then I wanted to go ahead and reread books 2, Red Seas Under Red Skies, and Republic of Thieves in 2022. So I'm all caught up with that. Not caught up, but like I reread the books. And hopefully, you know, Scott Lynch comes out with book 4 soon. I think he's planning on releasing some novellas soon set in that same world. So definitely looking forward to that. I also reread 5 books by one of my all-time favorite sci-fi authors, which is, of course, Sylvain Neville. And I reread the novella, The Test, which is definitely one of the best sci-fi novellas I've ever read. I reread A History of What Comes Next, which is the first book in his new trilogy, Take Them to the Stars. And I read this like right before the second book came out this year. I'm probably going to reread books 1 and 2 in 2023, right before the third book and the final book in the trilogy comes out. And yeah, it's definitely one of the better sci-fi trilogies I've read. But this is my favorite. Of course, it's the Themis Files. Sleeping Giants, Waking Gods, and Only Human. Probably the only trilogy that I would give all books 5 stars in the series. I know people don't really like book 3, but I just love all of them, and I love the audiobooks for them. And I wanted to go ahead and just reread them, not only because I enjoy them, but because Stacy, my girlfriend, actually read them for the first time and enjoyed books 1 and 2, not so much book 3, but it was a very fun reread experience. Speaking of Stacy, we had a lot of buddy reads this year, as you can imagine, and a few of them were rereads for me. One of them was You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes, which is the third Joel Goldberg book. I had already read this one and the other 2 books. She had only read the first 2 books, so she was actually reading this for the first time, and I read it to her, which was a lot of fun. And this is still my favorite in the series, and I believe book 4 is coming out next year, and we're both very excited for that. I also reread Sphere, and this was the very first Michael Crichton book she read, so that was a lot of fun. Of course, this is probably my favorite. It's definitely in my top 3 somewhere, but it's one of my favorite Michael Crichton books, and she also enjoyed it. And then, of course, the obligatory moment where I mentioned this book for the upteenth time, Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie. Of course, this is probably my most reread book ever. Like 8 or 9 times I've read this by now, and it was the first time Stacy had ever read the book. I read the book to her, and she really enjoyed it, so I'm definitely glad for that. And actually early on in the year when I was trying to read like a bunch of short books for, I don't even remember why, but I read the sequel to Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie, After Ever After. And actually, funny enough, this was written like a few years after Drums, Girls, and Dangerous Pie, but I only learned about it like 2 years ago. So there's like 15 years or so where I just never even knew it existed. So it was a lot of fun to like read this for the first time a few years ago, and then rereading it, it's still very good. Also, a couple more random rereads. Again, another short book, Farewell Summer by Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury. I need to go ahead and try to read all of his stuff. I've only read, well, I think I've read like 70 or 75% of the books, but I need to stop rereading and just actually read his other stuff. But Farewell Summer is pretty good. I also reread the first Fred the Vampire Accountant. It has a very long name that I'm not going to repeat here because there's no way I can memorize that. But anyway, the first book I read last year, I think, and so I wanted to try to catch up on the series, so I didn't really remember book 1 that well, so I went ahead and reread book 1, and now I think I'm up to book 5 now, so hopefully I can read some more of that in 2023. Another one of my favorite authors of all time is Lisa Jewell, and she had a new book come out this year that was actually a sequel to a previous book, and that book would be The Family Upstairs. And can you guess what I did? I reread it, and this is probably my second favorite Lisa Jewell book of all time. Of course, I've given most of her books 5 stars, but this one is especially good. And the sequel was The Family Remains, which wasn't quite as good as this one, but it was still excellent. I gave it 5 stars, of course, but I had a really fun time rereading it knowing already what was going to happen. So it was a lot of fun. And if I'm not missing anything or omitting anything, I believe I have 3 more books to talk about. It's a trilogy. It's actually the second trilogy in the overall series. You guys might be able to guess what it is. If not, I will show you right now. It's the second John Cleaver trilogy after I Am Not a Serial Killer, Mr. Monster, and I Don't Want to Kill You. I love that trilogy. Like, all of those books are 5 stars. All 3 of these books are more like 4.5 stars, so they're not quite as good as the first trilogy, but it's still an awesome trilogy. You've got The Devil's Only Friend, Over Your Dead Body, and Nothing Left to Lose. Great trilogy, and yeah, I believe those are all of my rereads. So you can tell that I reread a lot, or especially this year. I do, you know, in the past I did reread occasionally, like Song of Ice and Fire, and then, you know, I've read most of Stephen King stuff, so anytime I read Stephen King, it's usually a reread, and 2022 was the year of Stephen King rereads. Hopefully next year in 2023, I can keep my rereads to a minimum. I'm going to try for 15 or less, which basically gives me 1 a month, and then the 3 additional ones are the Stephen King short story collections. And yeah, if I can keep it below that, or at least close to that, that would be great, because my rereads for this year have already exceeded 60, I believe, which is ridiculous. I need to actually read some newer books and newer books that I haven't read. So hopefully, you know, that's the goal for 2023. All right, so what did you guys think of all my rereads for this year? Do you guys like to reread a lot, or do you guys avoid rereading at all costs and you're just one and done? Please let me know all of your comments down in the comments below. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my YouTube channel and the Bookish Drama Discord. And if you'd like to further support me, go check out Patreon. And I also have my Amazon wish list if you'd like to buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.